Thank you all very much for that presentation, and certainly triggered some thinking about what the farm management system of the future looks like. I guess certainly I've seen farmers that struggle with getting sensible farm accounts on a financial basis, let alone retaining some of the data around farm performance on a production basis, and you certainly run into the troubles of red tractors not talking to green tractors and all those sorts of things. Do you see those problems as solvable? Do you see, the three of you see a farmer not too far down the track being able to take all those yield maps that are stored on a hard drive somewhere and actually make use of them and get something sensible out of them? Is that where we're heading? Whose game?
Yeah, have a crack. Look, I do think it's going to happen. There's the OADA initiative in the US where they're looking...
Which is?
Oh, don't ask me to explain what that means. It's like a data standardisation... There you go. Good man. Thanks, Matthew. $5. But yeah, I mean, that's playing out, and Monsanto and John Deere and all of those guys are all involved in that. I think, as I alluded to, those sort of things will flesh out, what needs to be. There's some great initiatives in there, and we're quite positive, and I think the rest will be down to market forces in terms of, there'll be conflicts of interest where people will have to say, no, we're not doing that. It's not in our commercial interest. But in doing so, I think the market will solve itself. I think there's also products out there now that you can plug into your 7-pin thing on your tractor and on your monitor, and it'll take a lot of data. The issue really comes down to, now that I've got that data and I've uploaded to the cloud, how do I reconcile that with that information and my ground truth information that comes in to my platform? And I think that's probably it's solvable, but it'll take a little bit more time to deal with.
Look, I think that there's much more opportunity for everybody within the sector to be able to have information that can flow and data that can flow across multiple platforms. I think even in the use of apps themselves today, not within agriculture, we're starting to see more connectivity between people that are creating apps and different companies that are working together to be able to shift that information back and forward across, and there's that synergy creates greater value for everybody.
I'm interested in, and one of the comments that's made here is that the variability, both in terms of climate and soil conditions in Australia, and the lack of, for example, a public resource like the US Geological Society soil maps at that high level of detail, means that we're a long way back from being able to implement some of those things under Australian conditions. Like the US Corn Belt is obviously vastly different to the hydroponic sands of Western Australia, for example. Do you think that's a limitation in Australia, either that the variabilities are one of the things we'll struggle with in trying to get sensible modelling and predictive tools, or that the lack of that public resource in terms of things like soil maps is also a limitation? Whose game?
Well, I'll start off. Look, I actually do think it is. It sets us a little behind where, for example, the US. I mean, you're absolutely right. The ability to move new technology and to make use of much richer data in the US does make the potential there, the immediate potential, much higher. For this type of technology. There certainly is more work that would need to be done here to be able to implement some of the technology that's available there. But as I said, what type of technology gets delivered here may look very different, and there may be workarounds and collaborations obviously that happen across the industry to make that work.
From my perspective, Mick, look, I think it's an issue, but across the different sectors, we do see biophysical models that operate very well when you look at historical data. One of the initiatives that in things like SenseT in Tasmania and elsewhere is the ingestion of things like silo data and that sort of broad scale climatic information, but also real-time sensors that are deployed strategically around the landscape that actually allow a more finer scale real-time measure to actually keep your models on track and to put the models, do that data model fusion up in the cloud And so you're feeding in regional scale information as well as proximal fine scale information, and the models that suggest across the different sectors that they actually perform pretty well.
So
it's just not
you
operational.
can
at the moment.
effectively plug some of those gaps.
Yep.
Where were we, Les?
Yeah, Les Copeland. Two questions, simple questions, but they might have difficult answers to whoever. Do you think this might open the way for a new method to deliver extension services? And the other is, do you see a future where financial information might be incorporated into the biophysical information to actually monitor on the go sort of the financial performance of the enterprise during the season?
A shoebox in the cloud.
Look, in terms of, I can sort of speak just on it from an AgWorld perspective. We have a library that we started out with actually that centralises, allows suppliers and research organisations and that to disseminate their information through that platform in field on the device for farmers and service providers to actually utilise that information at the right time. And it's quite a structured way of doing it so that it's not a keyword search on Google alone. It's actually down to how can I solve this problem in this particular crop or situation. And I think that we're all for allowing, we don't even charge, we just allow research organisations to put their data in, because that is how you begin to collaborate and change the play. We have suppliers like Syngenta and Bayer and that putting information in there as well. And we also have other independent trial providers as well. So I think it does change the way you can disseminate the information in a targeted, timely and relevant way. And we do the financial thing that you're looking at. It can be better, but we're on our way doing it. Yeah, that's mine. Bob.
Can I just offer an observation, not about the extension side, I'm going to leave that for others. But the financial one, obviously there's very strong user demand for integrating financial implications of different decisions in a process. And I reflect sometimes on something like the dairy industry, where if you see a drop in the VAT on a daily basis, you've got an immediate opportunity to do something about it. Very different case if you're selling animals to a sale yard. But being able to understand the trajectory that you're on and the likely financial implication is obviously a very high need. So the integration of biophysical and financial data is absolutely critical in the process.
And doable.
Where were we? Harvey?
Yeah, Harvey Gaynor from Oscott Limited. I think the cloud, as some of the speakers today have said, holds a lot of opportunity and promise for us. But the reality is, where a lot of us work, to get to the cloud, you've got to drive back to the office and connect to the cloud from there, perhaps after downloading something through your 7-pin plug on your tractor. So it all gets a bit clunky, and oftentimes that in itself is a reason for people not to do it. So I'm wondering what technology is coming along to give us better access, out in the field, in real time. And I know that Cyro's Nagara project seemed to have some promise, and David, you might be able to update us as to where that's at, or is there other technologies coming along that might let us get to the cloud where and when we want, the same way it happens, out the door here?
Or get the clouds when and where you want them.
Do you want to answer your? I was going to say we provide that connectivity thing, as in being real time all the time, is a big issue, particularly in Australia. We, from our company's perspective, we developed an online offline capability for the native app that we have on the mobile devices, so that it didn't stop you doing your work during the day, and it had the latest data since you were last in range, whenever that might be. And that when you go back into range, it automatically syncs that data up to the cloud. And these are basically a dumb client, goes up to the cloud, comes back with the calculations. Currently, that's about as good as it gets in terms of keeping your day's process going and having the most recent information, because you've been only out of range for an hour or something. And that allows you to progress through your job. In terms of, I think with the NBN and some of the satellite base station type approaches where they're not going to roll the cable out everywhere, and they're actually going to have major networked satellites and broker a deal with those companies. I think that will actually change the way things are done, and you'll be online a lot more. I think the cloud is highly optimised now for transmitting data and managing it. It's progressed out of sight over the last 3 or 4 years, and I think it'll do that again. But that's about where things are, as far as I'm aware, and there may be other opportunities.
I don't think I can add a lot to that, other than saying there's a lot of push also to onboard processing. So actually process, you have algorithms on the device that acquires the data. So you're not trying to transmit a lot of data, but actually very small packages, or you're automating some sort of process on board. I don't have information on Nagala. Sorry, Harvey, I can't update you on that one.
We've got a question down the back.
Peter Carberry from CSIRO. Mick, in response to your original question about Australia's relativity to the US, I believe that we're 10 years ahead of the US in providing the capability that was described by Climate Pro. You know, the product called Yield Profit's been out there for 10 years, can do everything that Climate Pro can do. It's had a certain level of uptake around Australia. Any paddock in Australia can be used to provide the same sort of information. It's had a reasonable level of uptake, but not every paddock in Australia is using it. So my question to Daniel is, what's the business model in the US to provide that service? You didn't mention anything about connection to the government underwritten insurance services, or the precision or prescription agriculture approach that Monsanto's taking around using or integrating the seed machinery information business. So it's not as simple as you portray or you presented without the connection to those other dimensions.
Sure. No, look, you are correct, and there is probably more than a 20-minute session to be able to talk about all the different components that add into what Monsanto is calling its climate platform as a whole. So you alluded to precision planting, and Monsanto had over the last few years made some investments in precision planting hardware with the view to combine some of the technology that we've acquired through hardware with the vast amounts of data that we have available on seed. So helping farmers to be able to make, firstly, the right decision about the variety of the hybrid to plant within their farm based on the specific and unique characteristics of an individual field, with the view to be at a place where you can use the information on that field, use the information that we have about those varieties to be able to make the very best planting decisions. And so that's around planting depth, planting density, even the variable use of different varieties within a field, and so that technology would, of course, then link in with those Climate Pro type information that I talked about before. So there is linkages within there, and yes, I alluded to it very briefly, but at Climate's inception there was a focus there around crop insurance, and with an aspiration to be at a place where there could be better risk modelling by farm, by field, by crop, by variety, down to that level, and even to be able to have things like an automatic payout based on a weather event, based on the information that's being collected around those farms. So it certainly is. There are other aspects that kind of plug into this technology, which is, I have to say, is evolving fast, and even within Monsanto. You have to sort of week by week find out, so what's the latest what we're doing, what's actually changed, where are we going next. It is a bit of a movable feast, and I've got to also say that Climate Corp in itself has gone through a major transformation in this brief period of time that Monsanto's acquired them. So they've staffed up dramatically. Obviously the investment that Monsanto's put in place there has sped up the development for that business quite considerably. So it is a fairly fast paced sector at this point in time.
Jim, we'll start with you.
Jim Prattley, Charles Sturt University. You would be aware that some farmers would be concerned with corporate involvement in farm data. You did mention that the farmer owns the data, and that if I read you correctly, and you might clarify it, that Monsanto would not be using the data. Now, I find that a little bit hard to believe, but I also think it's a little bit self-defeating in a way, because if you've got such extensive data being collected and available in real time, then things like monitoring disease or locust plagues or insurance claims or whatever seems to me a great step forward. And so I was just wondering whether you could clarify this sort of Monsanto component of it.
Sure, and I guess my comment there was the distinction between the Monsanto organisation and the Climate Corp organisation. And so obviously Climate Corp is using that information, as you say there's a lot of applicability there that data can be used for to benefit the farmer. But David Freeberg, as Climate Corp's CEO, and he was one of the founders there, his influence in guiding Monsanto's privacy policy was instrumental right from the inception of the acquisition there from Monsanto, and Monsanto accepted that very quickly and said, we understand that there is a lot of sensitivity around privacy and farmers' data, and we will respect that. And so I think that's a really good place to be, and I also think from the discussion we're having around the need to be able to allow farmers to move that data from one platform to the other where they see the greatest value. I mean, we think that that's a good thing as well, because it market forces then come to play, and that only adds value to the technology as a whole.
Could I just add to that I think there's a couple of, I kind of break data in this context into three buckets. Financial data, I don't want people seeing mine. Agronomic, I might want to opt into that. And then industry good, right? And I think the industry need a bit more data from an industry good perspective, which I'm sure companies like Monsanto that are prepared to share that data with, which helps. And then really the rest comes down to, as a grower or as a service provider, do you want to opt into that? Now, if the decision is that you want to use Climate Pro or whatever, then, and that's the thing you have to put in, but you don't have to do it, and it's a choice thing. I think that's kind of where we're at as an industry at the moment, and I think there's a lot more to be gained than lost. The banks and others have been selling data in aggregated forms for years for market demographics, and I think it's actually added a lot of competition, and new products have come to market because of that. And I kind of in some ways don't see that won't happen with the use of data in the ag industry itself. But again, I think ownership and opting in on choice and having a clear understanding is paramount in doing so. That's kind of how I would say.
Mr.
Matthew Pryor, two quick observations and a question. Harvey, on the on-property radio stuff in the States, we're seeing a lot of Wi-Fi, even quite large scale. So another CSIRO invention, which may actually come to save the day. It's not necessarily designed for that, but farms in the US are using it on a pretty large scale on farms. So that might be one answer. And Wi-Fi is in all your devices, so it's a good option. One, in the US, data that's collected by federal agencies and funded by federal regions is owned by the people. And you can get that data anytime you like, and it's a very big difference between the US and Australia, and it's something we need to do something about. That we have big repositories of data, and in theory they're open, but in practice they're not, or there are toll gates, and there really shouldn't be. It's already been paid for, so we shouldn't have to pay again. I'll get shot for that. So my question really was, we've talked about the importance of interoperability and standards, and I wouldn't mind a comment just from all three panellists on what their organisations in particular are doing to foster the development of open standards.
Sure, we're involved, because we're in the US, we're involved in the OADA. We're probably on the edges of it, just watching how things play out, but actually looking from a scientific perspective at a computer science perspective at their standard interfaces and schemas that they're using. And we will adopt a lot of those. We're an open platform, and I think that's, to me, that's a great start, and I think that'll move out to Australia. We have our guys, in particular this year, focused on what they call APIs, which is your Advanced Program Interface, which allows for the sharing of data each way. And we're super committed to doing that, because that's the only way we're going to change the game. So yeah, that's us, AgWorld.
Matt, I won't claim to represent the whole of CSRO. I'd be shot. Just from a personal perspective, I guess I've been involved in facilitating the connectivity between different third parties. For example, in the Sense-T area down in Tasmania, a lot of the cloud computing and data science areas are about ingesting third-party data and then doing whatever with it. And up in Queensland, for example, just linking the right people up of those third-party sort of technology providers and then exchanging data protocols, etc., so that they are interoperable. So there's a couple of examples at the project scale, but I just can't comment about the overarching strategic part.
Look, I might just comment from a philosophical perspective around how Monsanto specifically has operated in other technology to date. So if we look at things like biotech, in the United States and globally, Monsanto has taken a very open approach to licensing our biotech, our genetic traits. And we do that, for a good commercial reason. I mean, it gets our technology on more acres across the globe. And I think that you can transfer that same sort of thinking to the digital space as well.
Ross?
Yeah, Ross Kingwell from AGIC and University of Western Australia. I'd like a comment from Doug. We chatted about this over lunch. Now we are able to collect lots of data. We employ machines and gadgets that generate lots of data. But that data not only helps you during your annual decision making, but it also becomes an asset in its own right. So when you come to sell your business, you're not only selling land equipment, but you've also got a potential electronic asset that you can sell. So maybe, Doug, if you can just comment on some of the value that you've experienced regarding this electronic asset that farmers are now able to construct.
Right. Okay, so if we took it from a service provider's perspective, the platform we have clearly, as people bring their information and centralise it, they can report on it and analyse it as a service provider. So in this case, I'll be an agronomist. And if someone wants to buy my business, then they've got actually almost a forward-facing operational system that enables them to report and see the activity and so forth across a client base. So there's a value to a business doing that. If you go then to the farmer, a good example is in Western Australia. A bit over a year ago, 18 months back, there was a transaction by a corporate came in and bought two farms very close to each other, pretty well adjoining properties actually, and they paid $70,000 for the digital records on one farm and $10,000 for the paper on the other. I think that's quite a good example of commercial value being placed by a corporate entity coming and wanting to know how that farm was managed and actually be able to report on it as opposed to thumb their way through lots of paper. So I think there's definitely a value from that perspective.
Where are we? Jay?
Jay Horton, Strategis Partners. My question's a general one to the panel, and I'll paraphrase Niels Bohr, the nuclear physicist. He said something like, weather prediction is very difficult, particularly when it involves the future. So we have a situation where forecasts themselves have error associated with them, but yet the farmer still has to make a planting investment decision with that inaccurate weather prediction data. And so my question is around, well, how would you recommend the farmer plant or make his investment decision? Is it the expected weather forecast that you will provide him with? Is it something like the worst case that might happen, or a combination of good, bad, and expected?
Go on.
I reckon I'll go for worst case. No, I think I think predictive models are just like the weather forecast, and they have a certain amount of data, but you can't control the weather. But I guess if based on your debt to equity ratio and the ability to absorb a financial loss, that would dictate just how hard you came out of the gates and decided you were going to plant the program you're going to plant. I think there's been studies to show that more conservative input farmers actually get a better gross margin than high input farmers, pending the area that they're in, of course. But there's been studies on that by Condon Group. I think so. Yeah, from that perspective, I think you've got to just go. I would personally, in the area where I'm from, as Bruce Rock, I would be going for a more conservative approach due to that fantastic soil. But and it does depend on your financial situation. But I think what is a good thing to look at in this is that the things you can control, right? So if you have a nice production plan, you have a plan A and a plan B, hopefully, and a C. You want to be agile in your approach to implementing that plan and monitoring and measuring it as you go through, so you can pick and choose, and you make data-informed information decisions other than emotional, which is often it's the other way around. It's more emotional plus some bit of data, and I think understanding that each one of those decisions has a compounding effect, not just in the current season on your loss, but on your concurring losses that may occur or those that may follow. And I think that's about all you can do to manage it. I know we can predict when it's not going to rain pretty well.
The only bit I'd like to add to that is perhaps rather than saying just an emotional decision is an intuitive one. Yeah. So I think a lot of the best managers do things intuitively that are very, very hard to communicate to other people, and they ingest, if you like, their experiences and data and the weather forecasts and all that, and somehow bundle it all together under their own risk profile and make decisions that are comfortable for them.
Look, predictive modelling can help you make better decisions, but it doesn't take the risk out of farming. That's why I'm not a farmer.
How are we going? Yes, we've got a question.
Ian Dalgleish from Grain Growers. I've only been in this caper for about 6 months, but one of the challenges, and I don't know that it's necessarily so much a question for the panel, but more for a question for the room, the amount of research data that is currently sitting in this room that continues to find a very difficult direction to an outlet to growers. I would I guess challenge people to look to work in a more cooperative fashion to bring that information to the market, and you don't necessarily need to run through a completely commercial organisation to do that. So I just challenge people to have a think about where they're trying to put their research data and how they're trying to take it to the market.
I think we'll take that as a comment in inimitable Tony Jones fashion.